I am now looking through the material. I'm very committed now to staying quite purely sharing based on the guide. I know that I've witnessed in my own experience delivering lessons myself to myself from the guidebook, and I want to really keep it clear for us, the nature of the work, which is an emotional awareness. It's sort of increasing our emotional intelligence, and it's increasing our deeper knowing, which is a infinite kind of knowing. It's an expansive knowing, and it really does come from the heart, and it's kind of been denied in our culture, right? Well, just outright. So when I opened the book today, I opened it on bonus lesson communication, and it makes perfect sense actually, because there's been a lot of energy coming up around our ability to communicate effectively. So, what does effective or harmonious communication look like between ourselves and one another? Well, it looks harmonious, it looks more compassionate, it looks a lot more loving. And ultimately it's so much these deep core wounds, it's so much these deeper contempt and anger and hatred and fear that kind of keeps us in this very chaotic mental energy rather than connected. And some of you have probably heard me use this expression, which I heard from another spiritual teacher who said, the mind disconnected from the host destroys its host. And so we can probably really connect with that and see that in our own lives, that when we were disconnected. And that's really, in a very simple way, like the basis of this book from my own personal life experience was being in denial about not wanting to be in a relationship but not knowing how to break free, and so perpetually kind of just shutting that voice out and carrying on with the day to day because everything looked fine, but ending up in patterns which eventually led to really icky stuff. So we want to be uprooting these sort of dense patterns as and when we notice them, and getting better at just being at one with our intuition. And the more we do that, the less obvious it is, the less normal we are, or the less status quo we are. And yet our communication gets easier, better, and more aligned, because our communication is coming from a pure place within our essential self. And when we're more contained in our totality, we can ultimately express from within that container and shine light for the beacons who are ready to see. But there's no distortion of our own personal truth. Communication is, I have Francis, a fellow tribe member, talks about dialogue. That true communication is a dialogue from the heart. It's an exchange of aspects, insights, experiences. It's an exchange of information. And that exchange can either enlighten us or darken us. And that's what that these are the times we're looking at as conscious creators. We're coming from a place of, do we want to continue to choose the darkness, the fear, the separation, or do we want to choose more love, more compassion, more expansion, more oneness, more unity? And and it is scary. It is scary to start to expand into that, because you're having to face ages of shame, perhaps. You're having to face all the parts of yourself that you're told are bad and wrong. You're going to have to start to look at them and say, oh, look how bad I am. Or look how shameful I am, right? And trust. And that's, again, the weird paradox of all this, is that even though it was scary to start to share, it's only through sharing that I've had that the life that I've always deep down desired has started to reflect back at me. People I made excuses for are gone in my life because they're not vibrating with me anymore, right? And because I'm not making excuses. Commitment, love, deeper commitment, deeper love, and then that deeper commitment and love in others starts to reflect back at you. And communication, true communication, is undeniable. You can feel it. You can feel it in your heart space. You can feel the intuitive messages. You can flow with that. What we do need to get to this space, I gotta say, we need support. You know, often we need a lot of loving support. Hence being part of this tribe, right? Hence having a place to turn to that is committed to unconditional love, non judgment, right? So that we're not running away from situations out of fear and judgment and denial. This is a space where we're going to run into it and go, okay, what in you is creating that feeling? And how can we work with those feelings to make them better and make them more loving and make them a better, more clear kind of feeling space, right? We do have infinite capacity for a different perspective. It's just that this is new to us. And so, like, it takes a little while to have the energy, have the, because again, people are locked down emotionally. They don't even have access to that mental inspiration necessarily. Divinity is miraculous, so things can pop into us in various ways, but usually a transformational experience is something very visceral and tangible. It's not just like a mental concept. It's experiential, right? So the difference of us having a total experience versus a thought is, you know, worlds apart ultimately. Hence emotional storms, and having the humility and the courage to sit with our own emotions and be honest with ourselves. Wow, I feel shit right now and I'm just attacking the world for being poo. Right? And you can see that, you can see the connection there. If we're in attack mode, that will kind of feel icky to us. So yeah, just kind of pay attention to the default communication when we're just kind of defaulting in our style of communication, not really listening. Maybe give ourselves an exercise of observing. So maybe observing people in communication and whether or not you can feel intuitively people at a cafe, for example. Are they having a dialogue? Are they truly having a heartfelt dialogue? Or are they just regurgitating a mental story that keeps them fixed in place and then bouncing off of each other's pain bodies, whether they're gossiping, whether they're moaning, complaining? Just observe. It's from that very detached and non judgmental place. Simply observe people in the world and how they interact with one another. And then observe in yourself what interactions vibrate on certain levels. So you might have interactions. I think one of you I mentioned, one of you who I was coaching for a little bit mentioned like dick measure. Sorry about the expression, but like you mentioned about like this whole dick measuring personality that you had when it came to certain people's energies, maybe in a more businessy environment, and being like, yeah, I was getting my dick measuring, like, oh yeah, blah blah blah, blah, I do this, I do that, I do, and then I've not quite, like, I don't know fully get that, but then I do get it as well. That's an egoic projection that is like trying to make you better than the other person, and then the other person's trying to be better than you, and then you're trying to be better than the other person, and it's just this sort of like ego dance, you could say, ego arrogance dance to try to prove oneself, which of course being you are in your power if you're sovereign. So neither are in their power or sovereignty, and yet they're there trying to. So you guys, I think that's it for today. Yeah, I think that's it for today. And I had a phone call and I'm feeling I have a sense. So you guys are awesome. Have a great day. Love you loads. I hope that was useful to you. And just I'm just curious, like how are you guys sitting with your communication? Some of you, Julia, I think has vocalized an improvement in a communicative capacity where we can sit just that extra bit longer with emotions and shapeshift certain mental projections based on old judgment. Huge. So this is breakthrough energy. So a lot of us who have been maybe had a really hard few months or years, like the breakdown, the breakdown, the breakdown, and we're breaking through. We're breaking through. But bearing in mind, there's always going to be review. There's always going to maybe be a bit of residue. There's always going to be a timeline where we can look over past projections, old paradigm stuff. And also, this is a side note, but I'm getting this deep sense of a deeper clearing happening. Um, within the collective. So there's a lot of heightened reactivity. It's almost like a grieving. There's almost like this deep unconscious grief going on about grieving the world, grieving the old world, or grieving the death of the old paradigm. You know, like all of our old patterns and stress and da da da, we're saying goodbye to that and birthing this new creation. So there's like this deep despair and this deep mourning and this deep loss feeling and this deep like pain ultimately. But then within that pain there's actually a relief. There's actually this feeling of newness and excitement and otherworldliness, you know, beyond what we ever imagined possible. So it's very dynamic, it's very heightened, and yet just being here now in the present moment and communicating from that heart space is the juice of life. Have a great day, you guys. I hope that was useful to you, and I'll speak to you real soon. Take care. Bye.